Hi everyone, this is Rohit from Rise to Mastery, and today I'm excited to have Anantaraman Pattabiraman, who's the CEO of Inai, which are building segment for global payments. With a single integration, online merchants can connect to multiple payment gateways, wallets, alternative payment rails, and non-financial rails. Inai offers a no-code dashboard for product managers to design custom flows to suit their business needs. Anta was earlier CEO of Oro and was earlier VP at Goldman Sachs. He's done his MBA from Ahmedabad and bachelor's from IIT Madras. Welcome to Shona, Anta.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Rohit, for having me, and great to talk to you.
Awesome. So you had a typical journey where you became an engineer, and then you did your masters and did your MBA, and you went to London. How was your journey in your childhood and your initial days, and what led to Aura?
So, I mean, when I was growing up, right, I came from a middle-class family in India, and pretty much all my cousins were engineers. So I didn't. It was kind of drilled into my head that if I didn't end up being an engineer, I would not be doing justice to the rest of the family. So there wasn't much thought, I must say. But I was passionate about maths. I was passionate about numbers from childhood. So that always intrigued me. And then once I did my engineering, I was thinking about either going and pursuing a PhD or doing a master's in finance. And to be brutally honest and shameless with you, like the prospect of having to study for another 5 years before I see any income kind of drove me down the path of management studies. Again, there wasn't a lot of thought put in terms of like picking the careers. But then once I got into management, I kind of focused on either doing because my passion was numbers, going towards banking or operational stuff like supply chain operations and things like that. So those were the two things that I was interested in, and I did an internship at Asian Paints to kind of test out one of those passions of mine, and then finally decided to go and pursue finance.
Interesting. And what were some of the biggest learnings from being in a company like Goldman Sachs, which is one of the most competitive places, and you've been there for such a long time. What took you to leave Goldman Sachs and build your own company?
See, Goldman is like salt and pepper. So either you like it or you just hate it. What I tend to find with a lot of other Goldman folks is that either they stay for life or for a very long period of time. I stayed for about 11 years. Or they leave within the first 6 months to 1 year or so, somewhere in that sort of time frame. I had spent a fair amount of time at Goldman, and my father was an entrepreneur. He ended up selling his business because neither me nor my brother, who also ended up in finance, were interested in kind of taking over the business. Over the course of my career at Goldman, I had some disposable income, so I started investing in startups. I got close to a couple of the founders, so I was enamored by the prospect of building something from scratch. And having seen this as an angel investor, I wanted to do something on my own, and that's kind of what led me to leave Goldman to start my first business.
Got it. And before the call, we did talk about that. Fitness is one of my passions, and when you were at Goldman Sachs, was something you were building on the side? Or why did you choose to build a product which is related to fitness and not something related to finance? Because you're deeply involved into building financial products. I mean, not building, but you were involved in the day-to-day operations of Goldman Sachs.
Yeah, see, I think I would say that this fitness was a passion of mine, right? So I was into fitness even when I was at Goldman, but I was into sport from childhood. So I used to play soccer for my school and college teams and so on. So it was always my passion. in terms of what I wanted to do for at Oro, it was not where we ended up, right? So initially, to be honest, again, we started off by trying to do something in the medical space. So essentially, we were trying to build a video product that would allow consumers to directly connect with their doctors. So we started off with that idea. We tried our luck with the NHS to see if we would be able to connect them over video, patients with doctors. We built a queuing product for them, but we found no success in terms of trying to cut through the noise, and I had no relationships in the medical space to actually force that through. So it ended up being a pivot after a pivot after a pivot, and ultimately ended up in the fitness space, which was closely affiliated with what the original idea was. The original idea was to build something like what Babylon looks today. This was back in 2015-16.
Correct. And were you able to raise funding, and what was the entire process? Because you're a first time entrepreneur there. What were some of the lessons and learnings you learned from Oro?
See, I think one of my biggest lessons was to be honest with you, we picked the wrong business, right? And a lot of entrepreneurs, at least the first time, they go into a business where they probably haven't really thought through what the founder market fit is. When we were running Oro, we clearly realized that we had not, like both me and my co-founder, who also comes from a tech background, we had not really run a consumer product before. And building a consumer product is one thing, but then scaling it and distributing it requires a completely different skill set, which the founding team did not bring. And that was my biggest learning, is there was no founder market fit. And we decided, therefore, that when there was an opportunity to exit the company and sell it, we took it because we found that we would do a better job in a slightly different business where our skill sets were more aligned. So that was my biggest learning. And then the second thing was that we didn't do as well in my previous business was kind of de-risk some of the aspects where we were not good at. So we couldn't raise enough capital. Being a first-time founder in the UK, I mean, the market has changed so much in the last 4 or 5 years. Like back in 2017, when I first left government to start this business, my first round was about 150,000 pounds. And most of that money actually just came from me and my friends and family. It was a real struggle to kind of raise capital. And it was very hard for as an immigrant founder to raise money here. I didn't quite have the connections, so it was a significant challenge for me. But the market has moved on and quite substantially in the last 3 or 4 years. And because we were not well capitalized for a consumer product, we couldn't even de-risk the consumer facing side, the skill sets that we lacked as a founding team. We're not able to bring somebody experienced in the very early phases of the company on board to kind of de-risk that. So those were the two big learnings for us.
Got it. And especially for first-time founders, where do they make most of their mistakes? Is it you talked about funding and talent? Are there any other areas where first-time founders also make mistakes?
See, I think founders generally are super enamored by the product or the idea that they're building. So the most common reasons why companies fail is not being able to hit product market fit, right? And this is a concept that we didn't, at least I didn't appreciate as well in my first venture. Is, are you solving a real hard consumer problem and or a business problem? And then how sticky is your product? How much is your consumer willing to pay for this product, and how does that work? Is this really a business at the end of the day, right? So it's one thing to build something where a few people might find it useful, but is this a real business opportunity is something that founders fail to appreciate. And then the other reasons are obviously capital and then team being the two most prominent reasons why companies or startups fail.
Okay, and it's interesting that you went on to start your next startup this year. You've been part of the Y Combinator batch, and what led you to start Inai? What was the thought process?
Sure. So while we were building Oro, we had we were a digital subscription product, which is a B2C subscription product, and we were able to essentially sell into any market overnight without having to worry about distribution like a CPG product.
Right.
So we expanded. We started out in the UK. We expanded into the US. We expanded. We got a deal in Australia. So in lots of places. And what we found is that the checkout experience. We spent a lot of money trying to optimize the landing page and the messaging, the Facebook ad that would bring the customer to our landing page. But we didn't spend enough time optimizing that final checkout process. And most of the drop off was actually happening on that credit card page. And we started off with Stripe, but we were not able to localize the customer experience for each of the markets that we wanted to operate in. So we want our American consumers wanted to pay with PayPal. Some folks in Asia wanted to pay with other local wallets. Some of the customers wanted to split the payment. So these buy now, pay later products, each one of them became a custom integration that we as a business had to provide at the checkout. And these tickets would be sitting on our Jira board for months, and there would be heated discussions between our growth PM and our engineering team in terms of why these deliverables were not met. So this was a real pain point for us. And we started to think about how the architecture needs to look like in order to build this as a standalone product. So once we sold the company, we decided this was an exciting space for us to be building on, because it was a problem that we experienced, and we talked to a few other founders who were in the same space, and they all had pretty much the same problems.
All right, and I've had few founders who got into Y Combinator, but once you get into Y Combinator, it's always a special feeling. But how was your experience in Y Combinator and the whole process, especially since I think the last 2 years it's been all virtual now. What was your experience? And I think you're still part of the YC batch right now. You would be graduating soon, so just wanted to understand your experience there.
I think this experience has been transformational for us as a business on a few fronts. So we were part of startup school before in our previous business. We couldn't go to YC, we didn't get through to YC. And then also from a logistics perspective, it was going to be very hard. Like I have a young family here in London. Karthik has a young family here in Bangalore. It would be very hard for us to kind of uproot ourselves, uproot the engineers, and then move to San Francisco for 3 months. That was not an option. But in this instance, we were lucky to kind of get through. And also it was remote, so it kind of ticked all the boxes. In terms of how it has been transformational, I think it has focused the minds of myself and my co-founder to think in the same way, which is the YC way, which is to iterate fast, break a few things, put something out there, get quick customer feedback, and then complete that loop and keep building and iterating instead of trying to hypothesize what the customer need would be. I mean, we come in with a lot of bias into this product because we experienced the pain point. So we were building initially our idea of building this product was significantly biased by what we had experienced, but we also but going through YC has kind of forced us to not build out the entire product as we had imagined, and kind of build a minimum version product that we can share with customers, get feedback and iterate and move quickly on. I think that's been enormously helpful. And then obviously YC provides you a great network of folks who have been through this journey, of other founders, and learning from other founders in terms of the mistakes that they made either on the capital raising side or on the hiring side or on the sales side, I think has been enormously helpful. And then not to mention the network of investors that YC has exposed us to, which has enormously benefited our business. So I would highly recommend it.
All right, no, I think Y Combinator has been special in the last couple of years. And I want to talk about Inai. Especially when I was at OYO rooms, we struggled with understanding which would come sooner, supply or demand. I want to understand how do you onboard clients, and what are some of the distribution strategies that you use to onboard clients for a product like yours.
Yeah, so I mean, you're right. This is a chicken and egg problem. And with respect to payments, because we are an aggregator business, we had to show up with at least a minimum number of integrations. Because if you just show up only with Stripe as an integration, then there's not much value to working with Inai as opposed to going directly with let's say Stripe. So I think we focused on a couple of things. We focused on like one market initially, right? We focused only on like cross-border merchants, and we are focused on where the pain point is the most brutal in terms of them wanting to expand to multiple markets in the earlier stages of their life cycle, because they don't have to worry about distribution, and our product enables them to do just that. We focused on trying to focus on the smaller companies because they are much easier to onboard. So currently we're working with a lot of startups who and it's easier to onboard a startup than a company that makes already several $100 million in revenue. So those were some of the things that we adopted.
Got it. And when it came to the market, did you focus more on the US market, or how did you get to decide which market to capture? Because I think you did talk about rightfully like the Asian players would want to take local wallets, and the American counterparts would want to use PayPal. So how did you get to decide which market to tap into? And especially with the local startups, what was the process of deciding which founder should take up what particular hat or role in the initial stages?
See, I think in the initial stages that we had very clear understanding between us as founders as to what roles we would assume. I was going to focus, and I continue to focus on sales and marketing and fundraising, and Karthik focuses primarily on product and engineering at this point in time. And obviously we kind of split some of the sales calls and so on and so forth. But there's a clear delineation in terms of responsibilities, and I would highly encourage other founders to kind of think through that delineation so we can have some kind of KPIs, at least for the founders. So we put some targets. And I think one thing that I forgot to mention is YC forces you as a team, founding team, to set measurable goals on a periodic basis, be it 2 weeks or 4 weeks. And that's something that we absolutely want to incorporate even once we are out of YC, because I think that culture of having measurable goals and then evaluating what you did against those goals and trying to understand what led you to not meet those goals or beat those goals can be quite powerful in kind of pushing your business forward, even once you're not in that program. In terms of the market, I think we looked at where the pain point was the most acute. Where was the fragmentation in terms of payment providers the most acute, which is primarily in Asia. And so we are focused on a lot of merchants that are getting into Asia. These could be US merchants getting into Asia or Asian merchants just expanding locally, where the fragmentation is the most in terms of local payment methods. US is fairly unified other than PayPal and cards. But in Asia, the distribution of alternate payment methods is significantly larger. In many markets, if you don't offer APMs, you could lose almost 50% of the volume. So that's how we kind of thought about what was the initial markets that we would focus on.
Got it. Interesting. You talked about goal setting, and I wanted to understand what are the frameworks that you use to decide what to delegate and what to control, not only among your founding team but among your employees as well.
Yeah, this is a hard. There are no easy solutions, and there is no fixed recipe for things like this, right? Because every team is different. It also depends on the structure of your early team, how experienced folks are, and what you want to do. See, from our previous venture, what we realized is we kept everything to ourselves as founders, and we are only trying to delegate tasks as opposed to assigning them measurable KPIs and giving them a responsibility. So, but that was a mistake in hindsight. It doesn't empower your team who are at the fighting those battles, either on the engineering side or on the distribution side. They are a lot closer in order to make those decisions. So in our second venture, what we have done is we've tried to delegate at least a lot more of the responsibility to our teams, and we have like KPIs in place. So for example, we might say that the success rate of our transaction needs to be at least 99.9999, and the failure rate is like 10 to the power minus 10. So you give that as a measurable goal to the engineering team, and then let them figure out what is the best way to implement your product in order to meet that goal, instead of you trying to micromanage. So that's something that's worked for us in the second venture. We are finding, we're still very early. We found better results with a process where we are able to give them measurable goals and evaluate them on the against those goals. And I think one of the learnings that we had is to not to fear failure, right? So you give your team goals, but then you don't necessarily beat them up when they fail to hit those goals. It's more of a collaborative discussion to understand what those goals are. And it also depends on whether those goals are stretch goals or are they realistic goals. So there is some kind of art involved in kind of setting this kind of process in place.
Very interesting. And Anta, you've been a part of large company like Goldman Sachs. You build a fitness product, now you're into fintech. How do you think about learning frameworks for new topics, and how do you go about constructing your own learning frameworks since you've worked in different verticals in different industries?
Yeah, so I try to approach the problem from bottom up, right? So if we had to solve the payment problem for our new venture, we try to understand what the entire flow looks like from the time the customer puts their credit card to the time the money hits the bank account of the merchant. So we try to understand deeply like what that flow looks like. Coming from a finance background, I was fairly familiar with what we needed to do, and then try to break down that problem into a series of sub problems, which smaller teams can basically tackle. Okay, what pieces are the software layer? Which pieces require the financial layer? Which piece do we require regulatory licenses in order to be able to do this? What are we in the flow of money or not? And so we try to approach the problem from a bottom-up approach, try to break them into smaller bite-sized problems, and then assign teams either between ourselves or with the early engineers or early people or the product folks that we have, and then try to assign them and then do it that way. If you try and do it right from the top, at least my experience is it's been difficult to solve them.
Got it. And especially in the early stages, there are a lot of decisions which have to be made. Now, how do you determine between head versus heart in decisions? Where how do you amplify what decisions have to be taken through data versus gut decisions? Do you have any process through that?
It's a difficult one, right? I think the most challenging part of running a startup is being able to, or being forced to make decisions when you don't have the full data, right? Yeah. We have to pick a market because we don't. This is an entirely new line of business. We are going after a segment of customer that has not been served by previous products, and we have to make a bet on whether this customer will actually adopt a product like this. based on, I don't know, a handful of conversations, right? If you go to an enterprise, they might want to do, they might hire a consultant, spends 12 months in order to get the consultant to collect these responses, and then another 12 months for their teams to kind of poke their head around. And then at the end of it all, after 2 years, they might decide not to do it. But we haven't got the time as a startup team to kind of spend 2 years, because your capital is going to run out. So I think it is about getting comfortable with making decisions with partial data, and being able to. That's why I really like the approach that YC kind of instills in their founders is, don't spend a lot of resources and time on building the full product, because if you've done that, you've basically exhausted 30% of your runway by just doing that. And when you don't know if your customer is actually going to want that product. So it makes sense to build not the full product, a limited version that you can put in front of the customer, and then get feedback, and then go and spend more resources on kind of further refining it, and do it in an iterative fashion, instead of going and spending a significant chunk of your resources on something that you don't know is going to work.
Got it. And what way do you use data to further inform the decisions you have made? Are there any instance, especially when you're running Oro or even in Inai, that you've used data for better decisions?
Absolutely right. So I think we both come from a technical background. We are both very comfortable handling large sets of data. Like, at least in Oro, we used to look at when our how do we determine the type of content that we want to serve our customer. We would look at what the content patterns are, consumption patterns are of all the classes that we have on the platform. Both from a duration perspective, from a intensity of the class, and so on and so forth, and the types of classes that we were serving. So we would spend a lot of time on it. With respect to Inai, again, we have a similar kind of approach. We look at how many people land up on our website, how many people, which pages do they peruse before they go and either book a demo or take a trial. And then once they take the trial, how many people actually get into the dashboard? What sort of integrations do they typically make? Are they looking for Stripe? Are they looking for PayPal? Are they looking for a Southeast Asian payment company? Right. So all of these inform you as a business owner or as a founder in terms of what is it that you want to learn from your customer in terms of what they're searching for.
And from product perspective, how do you determine what to do next and versus what to do later on?
Yeah, so I think one learning for me is try to solve the hair on fire problems, right? So we always try to understand which customer has the hair on fire problem, where if this problem is not solved, either the business is going to go under or going to face significant losses, and what is the value that you associate versus that hair on fire problem. And we try to prioritize on that basis. If it is, if you don't offer a payment method for a large company, maybe that's not a priority item. But for a smaller company, or if you're operating in one market where that particular payment method constitutes 50% of the volume of e-commerce transactions, then you better offer it, because that's going to mean a large dollar value to that particular merchant. So we try to identify what problems are hair on fire problems and what are nice to have, and we focus on only those. And then we also try to weight that against what's the dollar value of the opportunity in terms of value to the merchant, and therefore the value to us as a business by solving that problem for our customer.
All right, and you're a second-time founder now, but how do you assess risk today? Especially, you started the company, after during the time of COVID, but how do you approach to risk and decision making? Has it changed over the last 4 years since you started, your second company now?
It has. I think over a period of time, people too tend to get better at making decisions.
Yeah.
I think for us, at least for me personally, I think having gone through the previous experience, we know what decisions involve people's opinions. So we used to spend a lot of time kind of arguing within the founding team on how should this product look like for the customer, what is it that they might like, or what is everybody has a view in terms of what particularly when it comes to product, and especially when it deals with customer, everybody has a view on how to present this to the customer. And we would spend an enormous amount of time kind of debating within our team, which is essentially a waste of time, right? Ultimately, what instead of it's only an opinion of person A versus person B, but what matters most is both of them could be wrong. What matters most is what the customer who's going to pay for that product thinks. So one big thing that we have instituted with Inai when compared to Oro is basically not spend as much time arguing inside on things that really are opinions and therefore need to be driven by the voice of the customer, either sourced as a qualitative feedback or through data.
Correct. And Anta, I quickly want to do the top 3. What's your favorite business book?
The Hard Thing About Hard Things. That's one of my favorite.
Yeah, I think this is one of the most requested book from the guests who come on the podcast. And if you could go back time when you started an entrepreneurial journey or started Inai, what is the one thing you would have focused on or done anything differently?
With my second venture or my first one?
Both. Do you have any experience which you would want to change or something you would have focused on?
See, I think a couple of things that I would highly recommend from my entrepreneur journey is one is really think about the problem that you're solving and the founder market fit and the team market fit. The second thing is make sure that your family circumstances are all sorted, right? From like you have other commitments, and you need to make sure that you have an excellent support system to kind of take you through this. This is a hard ride. So that's something that I would highly recommend other people do. And then the third thing that I didn't do in my first venture is kind of allocate some time for myself, whether it's exercise, whether it's, I don't know, trying to unwind with the smaller holiday of just a couple of days here and there. But I feel that makes a material difference to my own mindset in terms of how I approach my day-to-day job, and that's a learning that I'm taking into my new venture.
Yeah, no, all excellent points. And what's your favorite online tool? For example, Gmail, Slack, Zoom, anything other?
Right now, I'm on Gmail and Zoom all the time.
All right, we'll put that in the show notes. And what is the best way people can know about Inai if they want to use a product, and what is the best way people can reach out to you?
Yeah, so I mean, if you are a startup entrepreneur, we are offering startups 6 months of free access to our tool. So you can email us at vip@inai.io, and we'll get you up and running with a global payment stack within 30 to 60 minutes.
Awesome. We'll put that in the show notes. Anta, thank you so much for taking our time speaking to us. I really enjoyed my conversation with you.
Thank you so much. Cheers.